Hello and welcome to Bitesized Audio. I'm Simon Stanhope. I'm an actor and audiobook narrator, and I've recorded all the stories on this channel. Classic, unabridged short stories, mostly from the Victorian and Edwardian eras. Tales of mystery and suspense, detective stories, ghost stories, comedy and drama, by a wide range of authors, both well-known and many more obscure. If you enjoy this content, you'll find links in the video description to playlists and podcast series of all the stories I've narrated previously, as well as some background notes on the authors and the stories for those who'd like to read more. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's story. The Mystery of the Boat Express by Victor L. Whitechurch. Read by Simon Stanhope. It was a gusty, stormy morning in January, with the wind blowing a cold rain from the northwest. There were very few passengers by the Great Southern Boat Train to Porthampton that morning, for it was not the day one would choose, if one could help it, for a cross-channel journey, especially as the telegram from the coast on the station notice board proclaimed that the channel was rough and stormy. It wanted but 3 minutes to the starting of the train. A passenger came running from the booking office, a man of about 40 years of age, with fair beard and moustache, carrying a small Gladstone bag, a soft hat pulled well down over his eyes, and the collar of his greatcoat turned up. "What class, sir?" asked the guard as he drew near. "Second, please," replied the man. The guard noticed that he spoke with a slight foreign accent, and opened the door of an empty compartment. The passenger glanced hurriedly along the train, and then got in. "Will you please lock the door? I do not wish to be disturbed." The guard took the proffered half-crown, drew a key from his pocket, and turned the lock. The man pulled up the window. One or two more belated passengers came hurrying to the train, one just as it was about to start. The latter looked hastily into each carriage as he moved along the train. "Now then, sir, in here, please," and the guard opened the door of a compartment, blew his whistle, and the train started. At Porthampton, the guard remembered the locked door and ran down the platform to release the passenger. He opened the door and gave a start of surprise. The occupant of the compartment was huddled up in a heap on the floor on the further side, his head, with its back to the guard, leaning against the edge of the seat, and staining the cushion of the seat and the man's shoulder were splashes of blood. The guard gave a cry of alarm. A few station officials and passengers pressed forward. One of the latter, an elderly gentleman, exclaimed, "Then it was a shot I heard." "I'll trouble you for your name and address then, please, sir," said a quiet voice. "I am one of the company's detectives." The other produced his card. "I am the manager of the City and Southern Bank," he said. "All right, sir. Now let's have a look at the poor chap, and you shall tell us your story later. Someone fetch a doctor." He went into the compartment and gently raised the head of the unfortunate man. "He's dead, I'm afraid. Looks as if he shot himself." "There's a revolver on the seat," exclaimed the guard. The detective took it up, glanced at it sharply, and put it into his pocket. "Was he travelling alone?" "Yes," replied the guard. "Anyone in the next compartments?" "This is at the end of the coach. No one was in the next, I'm certain of that." A doctor came bustling up. They lifted the body onto the seat, and the medical man made an examination. "A bullet through the brain," he said. "Life must have been extinct for nearly an hour." "You say you heard a shot, sir?" asked the detective of the bank manager. "Yes, some time ago. I thought it was a fog signal. I little imagined it meant suicide. Do you want me? I am on my way to Paris, but I shall be back tomorrow." "You could attend the inquest here if we held it tomorrow evening?" "Certainly." The whistle of the steamer sounded, and the little group of passengers hurried away. The detective looked at the doctor, raising his eyebrows. "Queer, I think, sir?" he asked. The doctor nodded. "Half a minute," said the other. He darted out of the carriage. "Jenkins," he said to a subordinate on the platform, "it's lucky you're here. I want you to board the boat and cross on her. Bring back an account of all the passengers if you can. There's not a score of them." "Very good, sir." The detective went back to the carriage. "I understand a revolver was found," said the doctor. "Where?" The other showed the exact spot on the seat where the weapon had been lying. Then he took it from his pocket and showed it to the doctor. The latter examined it. "As you say, it's queer," he said. "Do you see what he's got in his right hand?" The detective looked. "A handkerchief," he exclaimed. "Will you see about getting the body to the waiting-room, sir? It may as well lie there. I'll examine the clothes afterwards. I've some work to do here first." He was a long time in the compartment, and before he left he summoned the guard once more. That night the evening papers had a paragraph stating that an unknown man had apparently committed suicide by shooting himself in the Porthampton boat express. The detective smiled when he read it. His smile changed into a frown, however, when Jenkins returned by the night boat and handed in his report. "Nothing suspicious about any of them," he said. "Then he must have slipped off on this side, out of the station," replied his chief enigmatically. "I bungled it a little." At the inquest, the guard was the first to give evidence. He mentioned that the deceased had spoken to him with a German accent. "How do you know that?" asked the coroner. "You can't be guard of the boat train for 5 years running, sir, without picking up hints. I can generally spot a Frenchman or a German." He concluded by giving a brief account of his discovery of the body. The coroner asked a few questions, adding, "No one else could have got in with him?" "Impossible, sir. The further door was locked already, and, as I said, he asked for the other to be locked." "He seemed to want to be alone?" asked a juryman. "Yes." The juryman nodded sagaciously. "Suicide, premeditated," he murmured. Mr. Clinton, the bank manager, was allowed to give evidence next, as he was anxious to catch the last train back to town. "I was travelling in the compartment next but two to the deceased," he said, "and was half dozing over a book, when I heard a slight report. The wind was very high, and both windows were shut." "A report of a pistol?" "I didn't think so at the time. There were 3 other passengers with me, and we all imagined it was probably a detonator on the line, such as is used in fog, or in warning the driver that a gang of men are at work. I am interested in railway matters, and I jumped up at once and looked out of both windows. There was nothing to be seen, and the train did not slacken speed, so we all thought no more about it, till I was told at Porthampton what had happened." "When did you hear the shot?" "About half an hour after leaving London." Next came the doctor. He stated, concisely, that death had been caused by a bullet which had entered the deceased's head at the right temple, passed through the skull, and carried away a piece of the bone on the further side. He agreed that the time which had elapsed might reasonably coincide with the shot that Mr. Clinton had heard, and described how he found the body lying on the floor close to the further door, "As a man might naturally have fallen after he had shot himself?" asked the juryman who had spoken before. "I don't think so," replied the doctor shortly. A sensation ran round the court. "Why not?" asked the coroner. "There are circumstances in the case which are baffling. The wound was just in the position likely for a man who had shot himself with a pistol, holding it in his right hand with the muzzle against his temple. Death must have been instantaneous. But the strange thing is that the deceased was clutching a handkerchief with his right hand, and that there were no powder marks round the wound. The shot must have been fired at a further distance." "But," said the coroner, "I understand that a revolver was found in the compartment." "It was found before I was on the spot," replied the doctor, "and the next witness will tell you more about it. It is not my professional business," he went on, "to hazard speculation, but I do say emphatically that, in my opinion, it is certainly not a case of suicide." The detective corroborated what the doctor had said. "Tell us about the revolver, please," said the coroner. "It was lying on the seat, away from the deceased. It was loaded in every chamber, and had not been discharged recently. The barrel was quite clean inside." "I examined the compartment carefully," he went on, "and although, as the doctor has told you, the bullet went through the skull, carrying away a piece of the bone, I could find neither bone nor bullet, nor any mark of either, in the carriage." "Was the window open?" asked a juryman. "Yes, at the end where the body had fallen. The other was shut. I know what your question implies, but if the man had been shot by someone outside the open window, the bullet mark would have been found at the opposite end of the compartment. If, on the other hand, the bullet, after penetrating the skull, had gone out of the open window, the shot must have been fired inside, which appears impossible, especially as both doors were found locked, and the murderer could not have opened the other window from outside and then fired through it." "What is your opinion, then?" asked the coroner. "Murder," he replied, "but how, I cannot say." "You have taken steps?" "As far as possible." He stated further that there was no clue to identify the dead man. He carried no papers, his bag only contained clothing, and his linen was not marked. "Nothing else?" The witness hesitated. "There was something which might be a possible clue, sir, but I will ask you not to make me mention it at present." An adjournment was made for a fortnight at the request of the police. But at the adjournment the detective said bluntly that he had no more evidence, and the inspector of police who was in charge of the case was equally reticent. Finally, the jury returned the rather strange verdict of "found shot, apparently by some person unknown," and the newspapers curtly referred to the case as another unsolved railway mystery. So much for the story. I had the sequel from the very man who unravelled the mystery, now retired from business on a comfortable pension. He was telling me some of his exploits one day, when I happened to mention the Porthampton murder. "That was a curious affair," I said. "You never solved it, did you?" He filled and lit his pipe thoughtfully. "I can't say I didn't do that," he replied, "but—" and he laughed. "I wasn't allowed to get the credit of it. The official police stopped me. Look here," he went on, "it happened 5 years ago, and is forgotten. I don't mind telling you the tale, if you like." "I'd better begin at the start," he continued. "I was pretty convinced from the first that the murderer, if there were one, had been on the train, and probably given us the slip at Porthampton station. But I had very little to go upon. As a sort of forlorn hope, however, It dawned upon me that something might be discovered if I found the exact spot on the line where the bank manager, Mr. Clinton, had heard the shot. He had said it was about half an hour after leaving London. I ran up to town the morning after the inquest and called on him. "Can't you recollect exactly where it was on the line?" I asked. He thought for a minute. "Let me see. Yes, I can. We ran through Hazleton Station a minute or so afterwards." "Hazleton!" I exclaimed. "A big village, I think. Now, Mr. Clinton, when you looked out, you're sure you saw no one? On the footboard, for example?" "Positive. I couldn't have helped seeing anyone if he had been there. I glanced both up and down the track, on both sides." I took the next train to Hazleton, determined to patrol the line for a mile or so up from the station. It was just a remote possibility that I might find something, perhaps even a pistol. It was a fruitless search, however, so, giving it up, I made up my mind to seek a place of refreshment. A road ran parallel with the upside of the line, quite close. I climbed over the palings for easier walking and got into the road. There were a few small houses, almost new, of the suburban villa type, for Hazleton was getting a name as a picturesque neighbourhood, being only half an hour's run from town. As I walked along, thinking that the train must have been passing close by the spot when the mysterious tragedy happened, my glance fell on the gate-post of one of the villas. On it was the name of the house, The Maples. I gave a start, and I'll tell you why. You may remember that at the inquest I stated that there was a small possible clue, which I wished to keep to myself. In the pocket of the murdered man, I had found a current number of a newspaper, on the outside cover of which was scrawled in pencil those very words, The Maples. At once I made up my mind. I found my way to the only newspaper shop in the village, and made some inquiries. At what hour could I have a morning paper delivered? I was told the newspaper train arrived pretty early, and that the boy started on his rounds at 7. I chatted away, leading the conversation up to the Maples. Yes, they sent papers to that house. "Who lives there?" I asked casually. "Foreigners, I think, sir. They haven't been long at Hazleton. I've quite forgotten their name for the moment." I was evidently on a track. Sometimes boldness is the best action for discovering things, so I determined to call at the Maples. The point was this. The paper found on the man had evidently been left at this house the very morning he was murdered. The obvious deduction was that the poor wretch himself had been in the house. The door was opened by a fair-haired young woman with a pale, anxious face. I saw, at a glance, she had been crying. "What is it, please, you want?" she asked nervously, with a strong foreign accent. I came to the point at once. "Information about a fellow countryman of yours who left this house early on Tuesday morning and was found dead in the Porthampton boat express," I said. She clasped her hands together and gave a little cry. "Ach!" she exclaimed. "Are you of the English police?" "Not exactly," I replied. "I am in the service of the railway company." She hesitated. I thought she was about to faint. Then, pulling herself together with an effort, she said, "Will you come in? You need not fear. There is no one else in the house." She led me into a sitting-room, sat down, wringing her hands, and said, in a low voice, "He was my brother." "Your brother? But if you knew, why have you not identified him?" She shook her head. "I was afraid. They might kill me too, Himmel! But you do not know how I am suffering." "Then you know he was murdered?" I asked in surprise. She nodded. "I saw it," she gasped. It has haunted me ever since. It was terrible, and I could do nothing. Poor Andre." "Come," I said. "You must tell me everything. I want to be your friend." But, she faltered, "it is the police whom I fear, and the others you do not know." "My dear young lady," I said, "I assure you, you have nothing to fear from the police. They are only too anxious to find the murderer, and if you know, you can help them." She shook her head again. "You do not understand," she said. There was a long pause. Then she spoke again, more calmly. "I will tell you," she said, "since you have discovered so much. I was afraid of this. My name is Cambon. Andre and I are natives of Alsace, of French extraction, but of German nationality. And, you see, we were both in the secret service of the German government. I cannot tell you how it all happened, but Herr Otto Schuster had us in his hands. He is a bad man. It began by accident, a little sketch that I made of one of your English forts, and Andre mentioned it. Schuster paid us for it. We were poor, and ever since he has held us in his hand. There is a retired officer of your artillery living here in Hazelton, Major Dent. He had invented a new gun, and your War Office was going to make experiments with it. Schuster told us we must come down here and try and get the drawings, so he took this house for us. We got to know the Major. I taught his little girl German, and, well, I got hold of the plans and made a rough copy." "And sold it to Schuster?" "No, that is why it all happened. It was Pierre Dupré who interfered. You do not know him? Oh, he is one of the cleverest spies of the French government, and he found out what we were doing. He came here and saw my brother, just as we were about to send the plans to Schuster. He appealed to André's French parentage. He entreated, reviled him for being a false Alsatian, for many of us still hate the Germans, though we obey them. And André gave way. He gave the plans to Pierre Dupré, and Dupré was to pay him 20,000 francs to his order at a bank in Paris. We meant to retire then, to get away from the power of Otto Schuster. That was last Monday, and Dupré took the plans back with him to London. It was early on Tuesday morning that the warning came, by the first post. Pierre Dupré sent it. He said that Schuster had found out, and advised my brother to go to Paris at once. There was scarcely time to arrange anything, for André saw that he must take the next train to town to catch the boat express. I packed up a few things in his bag, and he put in his revolver. He was very nervous and afraid of Schuster, and said he should keep the weapon ready during the whole journey. I was to follow him in a few days' time. Then we arranged a signal, so that I should know he had caught the express. He was to wave his handkerchief from the window as the train passed this house. Can you guess now? Schuster must have tracked him to the train, but was too late to get in with him. I stood just outside the front door, waiting. Then the train came in sight, and I saw André leaning out of the window, waving his handkerchief. I waved mine in return. Schuster must have seen me doing so, and that evidently gave him the idea that André was leaning out of the carriage, and that an unexpected chance of killing him had offered itself. For suddenly, just as the train was opposite the house, I saw a man's head and arm come out of a window 2 compartments behind my brother. Something shone in his hand. He leant forward, took aim at André. There was a flash, and I saw my brother fall back into the carriage, while Schuster, for it was near enough to recognize him, immediately retired into his. Now I understood why no traces of bone or bullet were found. The latter went through Cambon's head, while it was outside the carriage. Well, By strong arguments, I prevailed upon his sister to go to town with me at once. Now she had told her story, a new idea seemed to have got possession of her. The phase of fright was passing. Vengeance was taking its place. "Yes, I will go with you," she said. "I don't care what your police do with me, if they find Otto Schuster." But I had my doubts, and said nothing. It was as I had expected. The Chief Inspector at Scotland Yard took down the information without comment, thought for a few minutes, and then said, "I will ask you to stay here a short time. I'm going to the Foreign Office. This is a very peculiar matter, and I cannot handle it without advice." In an hour's time he was back. A grim smile was on his face. He turned to Fräulein Cambon. "It may be some satisfaction to you to know that any charge against you for purloining valuable secrets has fallen through. Major Dent is not so artless as you supposed. His drawings were under lock and key at the War Office." "But—" she began, in astonishment. "What you copied were old designs of no value," he interrupted dryly, "as Monsieur Dupré will doubtless discover before long." She sprang from her seat. "So," she cried, "André has been murdered for nothing. But you will find this Schuster. Ah, you English police are so clever. You will hang him, yes?" The chief waved his hand. "Madam," he said, "my instructions are simply to see that you leave the country at once. With the rest we have nothing to do. When one enters the secret service of a government, one takes all risks, and you and your brother ought to have known this. You will understand," he went on, turning to me, "that nothing is to be done by us, and that you are to proceed no further." "You will not find Schuster? You will not avenge my poor brother?" she shrieked. He shook his head. "Then," she said, in a low voice, "I will avenge André myself. I will never rest until—" The chief cut her short. He evidently had little sympathy with spies. "You may do what you please, madam, but I warn you that it must not be in this country." Whether she carried out her threat or not, I often wonder. At all events, Otto Schuster, the German Secret Service agent, was found stabbed in the back in one of the narrow streets of Genoa not a year afterwards. And I have sometimes thought it may have been the sequel to the Porthampton Boat Express mystery. You've been listening to a bite-sized audiobook, read by me, Simon Stanhope. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe, click like, leave a comment if you'd like to, and do check out my playlists and podcast series of more than 200 past recordings if you'd like to hear more. If you'd like to help me to keep producing new content, you can find links on screen now or in the video description to my Patreon page, or to buy me a coffee, or join as a channel member here on YouTube. Another great way to support me is via Bandcamp, bitesizedaudio.bandcamp.com, where you can subscribe for extra content, as well as purchase and download high-quality audio files to keep. This recording is copyright Bitesized Audio 2026. Thank you for listening.